Hello, lovelies. Welcome back to the MoonTime Munchies podcast. I am your host, Morgan Daly, and today's episode is all about habits and creating systems, so let's just dive right in. First, it's important to address why habits are important to begin with. Habits are the repetitive action of either one behavior at regular increments, such as daily or weekly, or most often a time dedicated to a specific behavior that evolves as you do. This is the difference between the habit of waking up at 5 a.m. that will consistently just be that single behavior and the time you set aside to work out, which is ever evolving with your body, goals, and projects. The benefit from habits comes in long-term gratification, a much more deeply satisfying and fulfilling gratification due to the effort exerted to achieve, causing a corresponding sense of pride. Habits are accumulative practices, something that many of us find frustrating when we are too attached to the ego, and in comparison with our current agreed upon society, because we lack the perspective of time being a variable of little significance in comparison to the energies cultivated within that space-time. Most goals we desire to reach consist of repetitive actions that evolve over time until the goal has been reached. Habitual behaviors create a neurological pathway in the brain after approximately 30 days of repeating an action, and it becomes second nature for us to fall into just doing again and again. This is why we have a routine of how we brush our teeth or dry ourselves after the shower that we almost never think about. Being comfortable within our daily structures is what allows us the mental capacity to cope with unique obstacles, which is why it is so difficult to incorporate a new habit or change an old one. Changing a habit is simply noticing what no longer works, noticing what makes you feel excited and true to yourself, and replacing the inefficient and ineffective with a behavior of corresponding purpose to the vibration that which feels better for this version of you. To use an example, if feeling overwhelmed currently causes you to distract by watching videos that make you feel lethargic, but you have established that a system of deep breathing to calm your overwhelm, or journaling to process heavy thoughts and feelings that have come up, and listening to a song that makes you happy and inspires you to continue to be productive with your desired behavior would be more vibrationally aligned to who you are now, meaning something that would feel better to do in response and would actually influence your energy from one of overwhelm to one of readiness for aligned action. Then creating a new habit is about having the discipline and mindfulness to notice when the trigger of overwhelm leads to an already established behavior of dissociative binge watching, and deciding to respond with this more fulfilling, cleansing, and grounding behaviors, until this too becomes second nature. We find such difficulty in cultivating new habits because, by definition, habits are habitual, subconscious, an autopilot kind of response. We desire to change them when we recognize that what once may have helped us in a different state of personal evolution holds us back in this new iteration of self. It is important to start analyzing your daily habit. We often operate on autopilot, especially when we feel that we are unaligned to our desired life. This will lead us to dissociate from most of what we are doing. To change your daily routine, you must first be aware of what you are actually doing. If you must, document how each day truly plays out for about a week. Write down that you got out of bed and directly into the shower, or how you did the dishes dissociatively, but only after they were all dirty, or how you got home from an emotionally taxing day at work and watched 3 hours of sitcoms. If writing everything you do is too overwhelming, then set a quiet alarm on your phone for every 5, 10, 15, or 20 minutes to ask yourself, what are you actually doing in the moments that the alarms go off? Being mindful of our behaviors is the first step in changing them into this kind of accumulative practice that will take us to where we want to be in life. Just remember to document non-judgmentally. Your mind is an incredible tool, and it chooses the simplest ways to decompress and cope with all that you face on a daily basis. Sometimes the quickest and easiest way to get what our mind and body needs is the short-term gratification way. This should not be a reason for self-shame. It's necessary for us to indulge here and there. However, it is the long-term gratification that allows us to be truly nourished, fulfilled, proud, and cultivate a more sustainable and regular experiences of contentment and peace, which, after all, is what we're all in search for in most things. Even if you break down a lot of people's manifestations of oh, I want this partner, I want this job, it all comes down to how you think that that will improve your state of being, which comes down to your vibrational relationship with it. If you're having a problem with somebody at work, if you're having a problem with a family member, it is your relationship with that person. So what are you bringing to the table? Even if something's quote unquote not your fault, because change really doesn't have any place for blame, it's in recognizing how you feel that you understand the reflection within yourself of how the other parties involved feel and can alter the energy in which you approach the situation in, and thus your reality will begin to reflect you. We long for security and love externally when it is in the cultivation of such peace and contentment within the self that allows for such reflections of self in our reality. Many years ago, when you developed these habits, your subconscious brain knew that it may be easier to watch TV than the discipline it takes to meditate, but it did not understand that the meditation would be so much more beneficial for your brain's functions and productivity. You are already taking the first step towards change. Shame is not a helpful response, and you must be honest with yourself to make real change. It's not helpful to begin taking action to change things without first having an honest reflection of self. How do you spend your time? Why? How and when did you start doing this? Do you feel as good as you would like to, as you could feel? Does what you spend your time doing serve who you are today? Unaligned action leads to burnout. It doesn't help to just do things to say you were busy and productive. Ask yourself what you are actually doing and what exactly it's doing to make things better. In manifesting our desired lives, the key is becoming vibrationally harmonic with the reality that you desire. You believe it is possible and you make space for it. Action is only necessary when change or momentum needs to be made. Otherwise, it will happen if you believe it will. If you aren't clear on your why, you will simply resort back to what is comfortable. I have found that one of my personal greatest strengths when it comes to topics such as these is that I think both emotionally and logically, which allows me to recognize and utilize the strength in both. I find myself using the resource of how I feel as one of the most important tools in determining my next moves in a logical manner. I do this by understanding the function of our feelings as a sense responsible for telling us the frequency of a person, place, thing, or action in relation to our highest self. For example, when you aren't feeling 100%, you crave comfort foods because they match your frequency. You feel more excited to see people who are in vibrational resonance with you, the people that just get it. And you feel dread going to work because it is not aligned with what is in your best interest. And you would be far better served to stop taking unaligned action and focus on the feeling of abundance or sustenance from a place of contentment. How you feel is always important. My generation jokes about having their neurodivergent PTSD or witchy friends do a vibe check of a group of people or situation because we have practiced this sense regularly, mostly for our own safety. And as somebody who is all three, I can tell you how strong, useful, and fundamentally important, and yet tragically overlooked, this natural and crucial human ability is in Western culture. When it comes to modifying your daily behaviors, start with questioning whether this habit makes you feel good, even if you don't understand logically how this action brings you closer to your goal. When you follow what feels like deep resonance, you'll recognize it more with practice. You'll begin to trust that this action always brings you where you want to be, or at very least causes the resistance between what you and what you desire to surface and to be worked through. Evolve your choices and actions based on how they make you feel. It's much easier for the human mind to alter a habitual behavior than it is to start something or stop something completely new. This is where time becomes a beneficial resource for us, such as replacing the time that you would have spent smoking, for example, with chewing gum and so on and so forth, until your habit matches who you are now. This is because the pre-established habit is a neural pathway pre-established in your mind. These are easier to influence than to create new or stop completely, especially for neurodivergence. For we naturally do very few things habitually, unless it's a comfort. Our brain finds them too boring in their repetitive nature to maintain most activities long enough to create a habit, unless it's like self-soothing, as I said. So when we are often caught up in hyperfixation, blindness, low spoon days, or random spikes of dopamine, we are more often operating in habitual responses to our triggers than we do a daily routine kind of habit. For example, we may not wake up at the same time every day or get ready in the same order every morning, but we may always sing while washing the dishes or self-soothe the same way when we get back from a long day at work. When creating a habit, first establish why you want to make this change. You must be clear with your intention. When your brain creates excuses because the act of changing or creating a habit becomes a challenge, that you would rather talk yourself into a false prioritization. Oh, I can't speak. Reprioritization. There we go. Got it. Finally. So I don't even know how many takes that would have taken. Then to push through until this too is second nature, you need to remind yourself of why you wanted this habit in the first place to stay on course. Finding the core reason for making change, especially one that triggers an emotional response, such as excitement or a calm or a sense of accomplishment, reaffirms to your brain that learning this new behavior is worth the discipline it will take to establish. This is the point in initially creating the habit that has you assess whether or not this behavior is something that truly speaks to you and is something you feel drawn to incorporate into your life, or it's simply a trait that you admire in someone else. An example of an intention would be my reason for waking up at 5 a.m. each morning or trying to establish this habit is because it makes me feel clear-headed, organized, and like I can go through my routine, setting myself up to be productive before the world is awake and before this anxious energy around it being the time that everyone else is beginning to be productive and I'm not ready yet. Energetically speaking, it's the time where there's no subconscious social pressure to have a sense of what productivity looks like. And I can initiate this flow state that allows me to do each new task with ease and momentum rather than an overwhelmed feeling of waking up when everything's already in motion. Even like on a molecular level, like the sun's out and like cars are and there's just motion, there's movement. I like when it's quiet and peaceful and I can organize my thoughts first. But if I simply just wanted to wake up early because many successful people do, that wouldn't be a good enough reason for me to want to maintain the habit when it got difficult. It is important to start with small changes. Oh my God, I scrolled too far. Where am I? The act of establishing a habit is literally changing the way your brain responds or thinks to particular stimuli. It will become overwhelming if you try to change too many of these at once. Most habits are accumulative practices anyway, and results will come with time. Think about it as a chemical reaction. For example, if lemon and water makes lemon water, and you realize that you would be much happier with some lemonade. There are several stages between lemon water and lemonade that we oversimplify and just adding sugar. Kind of like how movies have B-roll and you're like, oh my God, a training montage is 30 seconds. Nah, that's not how it works. You need to realize that you would prefer lemonade and then believe that it's possible that you can accumulate sugar and change this drink, thus attracting the opportunity to do so. Then you learn what kind of sweetener you actually want, how much, how long to let it dissolve. Should you mix your drink or change other variables such as temperature? Then, even when you start to drink it, is this what you actually wanted? Have you continued to change yourself and now you want something completely different yet again? Time is irrelevant to this chemical reaction. It does not care if you answered all of these questions in a week or a year. All that matters is the process. You can't just vaguely think, I'd like something sweeter and dump a bowl of sugar or go buy a milkshake and expect it to be the lemonade that you really want. I understand that this is a frustrating concept for most of us. But two things that have helped me with this idea are first, that the time's going to pass either way, and I'd rather spend it doing something that feels more authentic and fulfilling to me personally. Second, the habits that you create should be for you, and if you are creating a habit to show the end result to somebody, you may need to go back to the intentions step. Creating a plan is one of the most crucial parts to creating a habit. If you desire to fall into a behavior with ease, you must understand fully what it is you're asking yourself to do. For example, if you want to stop eating junk food, that immediately falls apart unless you have a plan of a course of actions of how you will change this. Will you make a meal plan? Will you delete the food delivery app? Will you only shop for non-packaged foods? Will you stop getting snacks or desserts when you go out? Will you be mindful and ask yourself what you're eating every time you eat? Making a plan means when the time of day comes that you would normally do this habit, you know what to do instead. If the goal is to wake up at a certain time, then it could be as simple as when you hear the alarm go off, get out of bed. A simple cause and effect with no room for negotiation. We would simply all burn through our allowed patience, willpower, or discipline if we did not change the circumstances we are in before attempting to align with the goal that we are trying to create. Of course, you may need to modify the behavior to best fit your life. Maybe you will need to put this alarm across the room and make your bed before you go turn it off to keep yourself from making excuses. This is personal. However, some goals are much more complex, like writing a book, for example. The habit itself is easy. It's the discipline of carving out a certain amount of time each day to do the work. But without planning, you would not know how to begin such an elaborate and massive goal. Breaking down the daunting responsibility of a novel into what you can do today is the organization required to actually implement this habit into your life. It is important to acknowledge the excuses or stories that we tell ourselves. When you say that there is not enough time in the day, you are trying to comfort yourself for the shame you feel by not accomplishing more. But the result of that story you tell yourself is convincing your minds that it is only possible to do a small amount each day, and manifesting more obstacles to keep you busy and overwhelmed. Having a stronger willpower or more discipline is not a skill you're born with, but one you develop by dropping the narrative of shame, guilt, and limitation. It can feel frustrating to not be as fit or as financially stable or as knowledgeable about a particular topic as somebody else, but allowing that shame to consume you, you're only depleting your mental resources. which you could instead use to take the first step towards improving these things you hope to change. It's important to feel inspired by those around us. Inspiration excites us because it reminds us of something that we are meant to create or embody. But as soon as we begin to compare ourselves, we allow shame in. And that can create excuses or stories of why they have progressed further as a means to cope with what we feel as not enough or not worthy or insignificance. And eventually we stop trying. If you want to speak French, it should be because you want to speak French, not because you want to prove it to Sally from high school that you can be fancy and Parisian as well. Maybe learning French came easier to Sally because of the way that she thinks, or the environment she was raised in, or how much time she spends practicing that you are unaware of. But she could very well be trying to become proficient in something else that you already are. We all have different brains, different circumstances, different resources, and different priorities. For this reason, comparison is truly the thief of joy. We idolize individuals that are farther along than us in a particular goal and sometimes even make excuses for their success out of envy. They are no more equipped than you. They simply put in the work. Discipline is not a particularly easy thing, but if you better understand how the mind works, you can create habits that are possible to keep and set goals that are able to be obtained. It is the difference between running straight on the path to your desire while the path is blocked with fallen trees, bushes, potholes, etc., or taking the time to assess the situation and remove the obstacles. If you run straight into a bush and keep walking, the amount of walking you would have to do to actually pass through the bush would completely exhaust and defeat you when you could have just simply dug it up before walking the trail. I know many of us can feel defeated by the notion that if things truly matter to us, then we will make time for them, because that notion does not always take into consideration how large and out of our hands our obstacles can be. Or sometimes we are simply not ready to put in the work because we don't have a clear picture of exactly what we want. We haven't experienced such good before. Or maybe the work calls for some emotional triggers to some things that we haven't yet healed. For some of us, there can be decades of prep before we are ready to tackle certain goals. And that does not mean that you want it any less or that you are any less worthy of obtaining it. It simply means that there is wisdom to be found in that healing and growth within that vibrational resonance and that obstacle or limitation standing between you and your desire, and that you will not be ready to work towards this goal without the knowledge that you will gain from facing the obstacle. Life is all about the long game. So as long as you have an understanding of the direction you want to move in, you will only need to focus on today, which will make it much more bearable. Scientifically speaking, yes, the most direct and shortest distance-wise path between 2 points is a straight line, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the path with the shortest time to travel. Oftentimes, the momentum of life's ups and downs has more kinetic energy to move along its path quicker. And by embracing the flow state of life, those ups and downs will also be of service to your highest good, either providing fun detours and life experiences or moments of introspection and evolution towards a greater authenticity to self. I also want to note, in an effort to validate anyone out there who has also had trouble explaining their unique personal goals, especially to their ancestors who have settled for a routine of life that they've been taught, as opposed to the courageous choice of vulnerably aligning to what works for them, because throughout many steps of your process, you don't fully understand it yourself, and I too experienced that. Finally, before you can begin a new habit, you must ask yourself what success looks like to you. What does it feel like? How will you know when you've reached your goal? We can become stagnant if we do not enjoy what we are doing. Therefore, it becomes necessary for us to celebrate our milestones no matter how small. We must break them down. Even if we manage to complete the goal without allowing ourselves to be proud of each big step it took to get there, meaning that we trudge through with no momentum, we would lack the motivation to set a new goal and keep progressing if the achievement does not come with a sense of satisfaction. There should be no shame here either. There is a reason that we are driven by pleasure. Use it to your advantage. If your goal is to learn guitar, that is open-ended. You could say that you are done after learning notes, learning chords, learning your first song, performing your first gig, writing your first piece. You need to meditate on how you see yourself after having regularly practiced this habit. Why are you drawn to it? If the final result that you want to obtain is this image of you shredding through your solo of a song in a stadium show, then you have to have an understanding of where this will lead. And you can use that end goal and all of the milestones that lead to those moments as self-reflection. To feel pride for having worked for a tangible outcome and to assess what you would like to modify moving forward. In addition, for those who understand the law of attraction, if you were to meditate on that final outcome in enough detail that you begin to feel excitement, relief, pride, and or joy that comes with having reached that moment, you have subconsciously convinced your brain that that moment has already happened for you. It's already yours because you can feel it, and your mind will work to fill that empty space that you have made in the shape of that desire by aligning your current path with the opportunities that bring you to that moment. If you are trying to create a good habit, make it attractive. If you are trying to get rid of a bad habit, make it look unattractive. To use smoking as an example, if pictures of beautiful, barely dressed women on motorcycles are the kind of thing you think about when you think of smoking, it would make you want to do so. But the truth is that those things do not always go hand in hand, and now you're unhappy with this habit. So remind yourself of what it really looks like in your life. Print pictures of what smoking does to your lungs and teeth and tape them on your mirror, or put a statistic about smoking in bold type as your phone wallpaper. We operate on how images make us feel. For me, wearing workout gear that makes me feel good and want to work out, making a healthy meal that's pretty and makes me want to eat healthy, creating a cozy environment to work in that makes me want to do the work, are all resources that I utilize. Maybe for someone else, having a workout buddy makes that workout more desirable, and for another person, it could be that they like to flirt with the person in their local gym. Creating a habit shouldn't be about completely detaching from your comfort zone. It should be about regularly pushing the boundaries in a manner that you can still enjoy. Set yourself up in a way that completing the image becomes a satisfying thing to do. Most important to remember is to start small. Like I mentioned before, habits take an average of 30 days to create sound neurological pathways in the mind. And depending on the goal, it could take weeks, months, or years, or even decades to get to a point where you are striving for. Just start with today. Challenge yourself to maintain this for a week, and if you ever fail to execute your habit daily or as frequently as you desire, do not approach that situation from judgment, but rather ask why it didn't work and simply adjust. Having non-judgmental, regularly implemented moments of honest self-assessment is key, especially for anybody with ADHD like myself, or even things such as the things that we love or our motivation can be out of sight, out of mind. Like, we literally need to have pictures of our loved ones or like reminders to call them. And our brains are clever in their tendency to avoid the frequencies of resistance instead of facing or modifying them, so that there is no longer even a problem to nag in our subconscious. For the things that we really care about, many of us will have to readjust many times, but the more you do so, the better your understanding of self and If you don't enjoy knowing yourself better, maybe you should start with healing that. Starting is truly the hardest. Change is uncomfortable. But once you overcome that hurdle, you will have the skills to overcome any and all other obstacles. Remember, I'm sorry, that sounded so funny. It was like any and other obstacles. It was just very, I don't even know. Remember, things will always be as difficult as you allow yourself to believe that they are. When you change your habits, you change your day-to-day, which changes how you're living your life, which in turn changes how your life is unfolding, and most importantly, changes who you are as you become what you desire to be. We don't desire these things by accident. You are meant to create and work towards what excites you. As always, this has been my thoughts on some things. I'd love to hear your perspective. My name is Morgan Daly, and I'm on most platforms. Be kind, be mindful, and have a good day on purpose.